On today's all acoustic Ask Zach, we're going to look at this Baxendale Harmony conversion guitar from the 50s, and we're going to look at some other conversion guitars that I have, and we are going to look at my old Waterloo WL-14 from 2016 that I refinished and hot rodded with extra pickups. Well, hello friends, and welcome to Ask Zach. Today is an all acoustic episode, and we're going to look at this Harmony Baxendale conversion from the mid to late 1950s, a H162, I believe, and really great guitar. We're going to talk about this process, and of course also I'm going to look at some of the other conversions I have, and like I said, we're going to look at my old Waterloo guitar that's actually only about 9 years old, and I'm going to talk about all the hot rodding, the refinishing, and the relicking, adding pickups to, and all that stuff. So I thought we would put it all together for this all acoustic episode of Ask Zach. Of course, as always, I need to thank my Patreon members. I need to thank everyone that's hit the like button and subscribed and put money in the tip jar and bought a t-shirt or a coffee mug. I thank you for your support. Let's dive in. So just a little back history, and then we'll talk about the process. So Harmony Guitars has been around since, well, originally was around from about the late 1800s until about 1975. And then in 2018, the name was bought and it was restarted. But the original company made guitars in Chicago, and they were owned by Sears for a while. Then they became independent again, and they made guitars under a lot of different names. So they made guitars under the Harmony name, they made guitars under the Silvertone name. I mean, all sorts of different names. They would because they would make stuff for different stores and such. They would make Silvertone guitars for Sears, and yeah. So one thing that became popular, started to become popular a decade or so ago, was these conversion guitars, where people started realizing that these old Harmony guitars were made out of really good wood, and they had a nitro, lacquer finish on them. But the problem is that they didn't play great, and then a lot of them had really heavy ladder bracing. And what people started doing was they started converting them, because these guitars could be picked up pretty cheap many times. This is back when these guitars were $100, $200, and then they would pour a bunch of work into it, because it takes a lot of manpower to convert these guitars. But it's what you would call kind of a green process, because you're not having to spray more finish, and you're not having to there's minimal additional wood that's used. So it's really kind of a cool thing. It's a cool way of giving these old guitars a new life. Now, there are those that think it's kind of a strange thing to do, and that just leave the guitars alone, let them be what they are. But there's a lot of us that really like the fact that these old instruments are able to be revitalized and to sound arguably better. So let's talk about the process that these instruments go through. So these instruments basically get disassembled. So the neck comes off, they take the back off the guitar, and the bracings, which were ladder braced, which basically means you have these straight pieces of wood that just kind of go across here like that. They remove the ladder bracing and they put in the X bracing, which is what a Martin or a Gibson would have, a higher, unless we're talking about like an LG1 Gibson, which had ladder bracing. But so they changed that out. Many times the bridge and the saddle gets replaced. Then they glue the back on, and of course carefully have to fix the binding and such. And which they did a really good job on this one. Has some fun kind of tortoiseshell looking binding. Maybe it's just brown. No, I think it's tortoiseshell. And they also remove the neck and they do a neck reset, which many times has to be done to make them play halfway decently. Then they remove all the frets, they plane the fingerboard, and then they refret it. They also remove the old tuning machines and they put these kind of, these are Grovers, but they put different types of open gear, high quality tuners on there. And it really opens the instruments up. Now, part of the controversy here is that some people like the sound of ladder bracing, which is kind of a more mid-rangey kind of sound. But a lot of people have really gotten used to X bracing and like that. So this, of course, has been X braced, and I'll just play it a little for you now. So what you end up getting is, especially with this model, you get really in the ballpark of an OM28, and this is a 50s guitar. It's got spruce. This is a nice spruce top, and good mahogany back and sides and neck. So I think it's a really cool process. I think it's a really cool thing. So again, this was done by Scott Baxendale, who's one of the guys that's really innovated on this. One of the reasons I did this is because Scott has been kind of he has been watching the show. He comments and watches most of the Ask Zach episodes, and so I thought it would be fun to kind of spotlight him, and also because I had done a thing with Dan Lambert with the Buck Owens guitar that he fixed up for me. So nice to kind of spread the love around. And I think these guitars are a really great alternative to buying a new instrument. They've been completely redone as far as the guts. They play great. Now, I'll just admit right here, I like my action really low. And so because this is not my guitar, this is something that Scott sent me just to check out. He has it set up for someone that plays a little more heavy-handed. So the bridge is higher than I would like it. And also the nut is too. And so to just kind of bring the action down a little bit, I've put a capo on the first fret just to kind of bring it down a little bit. But it's a really great instrument. And of course, if this was my guitar, then I would just take it down to Glazer's shop, and they would bring down the nut a little bit, and they'd bring down the saddle a bit. But of course, that's also going to affect the tone of it and everything. So let's look at some other things. I mentioned Dan Lambert, of course, and this gets kind of into some philosophical aspects of this. So some of these guys, like Scott, I mean, he yanks all the ladder bracing out and goes X bracing. However, Dan Lambert out of El Paso, Texas, he prefers to keep the ladder bracing, but to do some recontouring of it and make it less heavy. And so you're able to kind of keep the ladder braced sound, but kind of just enhance it some. So because there's very much a ladder braced versus X bracing sound. And then let me just, before I hit on the Waterloo, I also want to revisit this fun mandocello kind of conversion thing that Scott Baxendale did. So this, let's be careful not to drop anything. So this is a little K guitar that was like a student model, and the problem is that the neck is pretty narrow and it doesn't really work well for a 6-string conversion. But they figured out that if you ganged up, and did courses of strings, you could turn it into a mandocello kind of instrument. So depending on the type of strings you use, you can have different tunings and such. Now I really like the way Scott sets these up. He puts an octave string on this second course here, and I have mine tuned down where my low string is an E, and it just has a really fun, nice sound. Also, this one has a K&K pickup that came that way from the factory, and I think this one was done when Scott was still in Georgia. Yeah, this one's Athens, Georgia. So here you can hear a little bit of this, the small-bodied, kind of fun little. So this is a really fun instrument also. So of course they had to plug some of the holes, because this was a 6-string guitar, and they put 8 open back tuner, well, 2 strip tuners on there. And then of course they took the back off and they put the X bracing. And if you want to do a deep dive on this, I did a whole episode on this K mandocello conversion by Baxendale. So now, just to kind of pull this around, I thought it'd be fun to talk about, I have a Waterloo WL-14. And before I show it, I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So I bought it in 2016 because JD Simo had one, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And it's the ladder braced version. And so I bought it and have used it a ton. It's been really my main acoustic guitar for 9 years, and I've traveled with it. I've even thrown it in a gig bag and flown with it, and it's a great little guitar. And my one complaint about it was that, well, one, again, it was my first ladder braced guitar, but my only complaint about it was that the finish really wasn't cracking or doing anything interesting. And I'm not hard on my guitars, but still, it was just one of those things that's like, why isn't the finish correct? Because I'd taken it all over the US and such, and it wasn't like it had some thick finish on it or something like that. But, sometimes late at night you do stupid things. And I was complaining to, my friend that shall remain unnamed. And he said, well, let's see what the finish is like on there. And so we took a little bit of acetone and we went to like a small area of the back and we wiped it, and finish came off, but it was really kind of granular looking. It was interesting. And so which I was fine with that. The thing I didn't want it to be where the acetone didn't do anything, because that means it's poly, or some type of polyester or, based finish, kind of a plasticky thing. And there's even nitro that won't come off with acetone and comes off in sheets of rubberized plastic, and it's supposed to be nitro. So at that point, I kind of, was just going to be like, okay, that's the way the instrument is. I'm just going to go with it. But because it was late at night, we ended up wiping the entire top of the guitar and part of the sides and like the front of the headstock. We ended up just going wacko, to the point that we even reshaped the headstock crudely, and my friend hand painted Gibson on there in the old logo. So here it is. So this was a Waterloo WL-14 TR, and so yeah, this is ladder braced and has a truss rod, adjustable truss rod, and I love this guitar. And now, of course, it has a old school black nitro finish on it that's also been heavily reliced. This has been in a freezer. You can see, where you have, this is mostly original finish that has been kind of like thinned and kind of wiped away some. And then of course we replaced the pick guard. The original pick guard was white, which was cool. I mean, it was a great looking instrument. But again, this is what happens late at night when we should have been, I don't know what we should have been doing, but this is what happened. And then also, I'm probably most of you know if you've been watching the channel, I really old John Leventhal is an influence on me, and I really like what he does on acoustic guitar and electric. And one of the things he does is he does this kind of dual pickup thing. And so I did the same thing on this guitar, because this is my main gigging acoustic. And so when I bought it, I had a K&K Mini put in there, and that was the only pickup for a long time. And then I decided I wanted to do the John Leventhal thing, which is basically you run some type of saddle transducer through a direct box, live, or in the studio, you just mic up the instrument. And then you have a sound hole pickup that you run through pedals and then run it, through an amp. And so live, it's a really cool thing because you're able to take up more space as an acoustic player, and you're also able to compete with electric instruments because you are electric. You're kind of half electric, half acoustic, and you can, kind of choose how you mix it, how loud your amp is, compared to your direct sound, which is more of your true acoustic thing. So, yeah, so I've got this Fishman humbucking pickup. This is the Rare Earth humbucker, and which is nice because it has a little volume control on it, and so that helps me kind of mix that in. And then most acoustic jacks are stereo already, and so I have the K&K attached to it and this pickup, and then I run this stereo Y cable, so it's a stereo, TRS to dual monos. And so one of them is marked K&K, which that would go to the direct box, and this other one would go to the pedal board and the amp. And this is a really cool thing, especially when you're an acoustic player that you're wanting to be able to solo and kind of compete with electric instruments, or you're just wanting to bring different textures, and different kind of sounds, because it basically sounds like two instruments almost, because you kind of have the acoustic thing going on, then you have this very electric thing that a lot of times you put like some tremolo and delay on it. And if you want to dig into that more, I've done interviews with John Leventhal where he's talked about this whole thing that he does. But getting back to the whole ladder brace, X brace things, these instruments are available either way. And so I really liked the ladder bracing. And so So hopefully you're kind of able to hear the kind of ladder braced thing, which is a more mid-rangey thing, and it's kind of less open in a way. And you kind of tack that on with a smaller bodied instrument, and you get a really kind of focused instrument. So again, this is a great guitar that I really enjoy playing a lot. And now I don't know what to call it now, because of course now it says Waterloo in the sound hole, but then it says Gibson on the headstock, but it's still kind of a Waterloo. So I guess it's a Watterson or a Gibbaloo. I think I'm going to call it a Gibbaloo. So, all right. Well, I think that's enough for today. Hope you've enjoyed our acoustic focused episode. I hope when you're thinking about an acoustic guitar, you will think about some of these conversion instruments like Scott Baxendale and Dan Lambert. And there's a guy, I think his name's James Burkett, that's down in Burkett, down in Alabama. But I think these guys are really doing really great work, and they're really taking these old guitars that, for so many people, they would just be wall art. And I've seen these things hanging in studios for years, and now those instruments are being converted and turned into real instruments, and they're cool. They're really cool. They have a cool look and vibe, and they're old wood, and now the labor is being poured into them to really make them great instruments. All right, guys. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.